Alright, before this video starts, I want to say like and subscribe if you already enjoyed the video or whatever, but check out my Twitter. I have a Twitter, Spearheart, FIM, that's it, that's the whole Twitter account. I also have a fucking YouTube. You can subscribe to me on there. I have YouTube. You can check the description, the discussion tab. You'll see updates and whatever. Anyway, let's get into this fanfic. What are we reading today here, boys? Twilight Explores ifunny. Written by Calix Winterridge. Chapter 1. Part of the ship, part of the crew. Part 1. It was a rather pleasant and temperate, quiet day in Equestria. The sun was shining and the wind was cool and fresh. The clouds were far away from the nation's capital, Canterlot. Twilight Sparkle, the monarch of Equestria, sat on her throne as she gently skimmed over a scroll, one amongst many. Much to her pleasure, the throne room was empty for the time being, except for her. Even better, no pony had come in and bothered her since this morning. It was almost midday and so far, things were going smoothly. The air was as calm as could be. The light from outside cast beautiful colors onto the throne room floor. Her tea that lifted up to her lips with a magical glow was still warm even. The parchment she was reading was a zoning permission document that involved a small business moving into a residential area in Ponyville. Typical endorsement papers, making sure that the area it would be taking over wasn't private or owned by the state. She was roughly halfway through the paper when suddenly a door to her right was cast open and in walked a bipedal creature. She jumped in her seat as she spun her head to the intrusion, nearly dropping her tea in the process out of surprise. It was Anon. Of course it was Anon. Was there ever any doubt that it wasn't him? He strolled into the throne room and closed the door behind him. As Twilight watched him intrude on her quiet evening, she noticed that he was holding a device in his hand, while his other one was placed into his back pocket. She recognized the device. It was his cell phone, a small computer machine that allowed him to make phone calls and browse the internet. He had only been in Equestria for a couple of weeks and she never really knew he had the chance to ask him how it worked, but given the amount of conversation the two of them were having, she figured asking him wouldn't be much to help her. As she assumed, he didn't even know how it worked. He just used it. Was Twilight calling him dumb? Nah, at least not as an official position of the state.
Good morning, Anon. Glad to see you up and before the 3 o'clock,
she said with a particular irate tone of voice, as he had just barged in here without announcing his presence first. Anon had glanced up from his phone at the sound of her voice and would look around himself, giving off the impression that he didn't know where he was at the moment. He would then turn to Twilight and would use his unoccupied hand to give her an awkward wave.
Hey Twilight, how's it hanging?
Anon greeted her. He then appeared to be confused as he looked around the throne room in search of something.
Pro gamer hint real quick, Twilight. Where's the little Timmy's room?
He asked as he turned to her more formally now, his question hanging in the air in front of Twilight as she tried to decipher what she had just heard. During Anon's stay here in Equestria, Twilight and her staff noticed that he didn't speak like the rest of them. They could understand each other as he shared their language, which was useful for obvious reasons. It allowed both parties to understand each other and communicate in a mutually beneficial way, but it was the way Anon spoke that threw them all for a loop. He spoke in such backwards ways, out of context that it didn't make sense, and only after he had explained what he wanted to have said did they understand him. It had gotten to a point that even Twilight's most skilled linguists that were tasked with understanding his ways couldn't understand or make sense of what he was talking about, even if they were to have a normal conversation for an extended period of time. He would just go on about these things called memes and online references, while sprouting one-liners about cultural references that they didn't have context for. Was Twilight calling him dumb? Maybe.
Do you mean the bathroom, Anon?
She asked as she attempted to guess what he was talking about. Anon nodded his head and gestured behind himself.
Yeah, I've been walking around this palace for like the past half hour looking for one, and every time I think I've found one, it's just a fucking broom closet or another library. Honestly, I'm not sure how you ponies get anything done,
he said in bewilderment. Twilight let out a groan as she tried to ignore his ill-mannered language. She then pointed with her hoof to the left of her, where a door on the other wall of the throne room conveniently sat. This one was clearly marked as an equestrian bathroom, but of course, Anon couldn't read it, presumably.
There's a bathroom right there. You can use it if you need to, but for future reference, try not to barge into the throne room like you did. You nearly gave me a heart attack.
Twilight would return to her scroll while still keeping an eye on Anon. He would look to the door she pointed out to him and nod.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And, yeah, my bad on that. I didn't know where I was. I was lost in the sauce,
he said as he turned to head towards the restroom, leaving a mildly confused Twilight behind him. She went back to reading her scroll till Anon stopped her for a second time and spoke out to her once again.
Oh, actually, Twilight, could you, hold on to this for a moment?
He asked. She looked back again from her scroll with even more mild annoyance to see him approaching her with his cell phone in hand. She raised an eyebrow.
What do you need me to hold on to your phone for? Can it fit into your pockets?
She asked as he came to a stop before her.
Yeah, it could fit into my pockets, but No Nut November is coming up, and I don't want to be tempted by the cringy softcore porn that gets featured on ifunny while I'm dropping a deuce, you know? He explained to her with more of his strange human linguistic communication. Twilight would squint her eyes at the device before looking at him in utter confusion.
Oh, what? You do know I have no idea what any of that means, right? Features? No, not Novembers? I mean, the only thing I got out of that was softcore.
Twilight was cut off as he placed his phone on the ground before her hooves.
Yeah, I get that, he said quickly. Look, I need to do this. I'll only be gone for a moment, and when I get back, I'll bounce out of here, okay?
He backed off the throne before turning to head to the bathroom. Twilight would let out yet another exasperated sigh as he left her. As he pushed open the door to the bathroom, Twilight could hear him mumble something under his breath. Something about porn addiction and the collapse of the West, whatever that meant. She would sigh as he left the room, the door of the bathroom shutting behind him. It would seem as if every time they met, she understood him less and less. She didn't like this. In fact, it troubled her greatly. She didn't exactly know the full extent of what Anon was capable of, or what he was in his world, but she was sure he was definitely an outsider. He radiated the traits of an absolute hermit constantly, even when he was outside of his personal chambers, and interacting with other ponies. Every time he would get locked into a conversation, he would leave the pony he was talking to with confused or out-of-touch reality. This specifically worried her most of all, as it was her duty to ensure that every pony in Equestria had friends, or at least some pony they could talk to in some capacity. It's not like she hadn't tried to help him already, because she did, many times. But overall, he was dodging her attempts left and right. All the while, he had his eyes glued to that phone of his. That damn phone. All he does is charge his phone and lay in his bed for the greater part of every day while he, quote, browses dank memes. Twilight was almost 100% sure that this phone was affecting his ability to be a normal functioning member of society. And she was sure that if she found a way to separate the two of them, he would be better off. Twilight could imagine him actually having friends that could stomach his presence long enough to actually like him and be down to hang out more than once. This was something she'd hoped for, but in his current state, this was far from achievable. Every time he meets new ponies, he starts quoting crime statistics while going on and on about the duality of man. Yet, on the other hoof, she knew if she tried to separate the two of them at all, it might do more harm than good. Just what is it about that phone that forced him to need it all the time? Evidently, her curiosity got the better of her as she placed her scroll and tea onto the arm of her throne chair. She used her magic to pick the small black device up off the ground in front of her and up to her face while it suddenly lit up. The screen of the phone illuminated with what looked like a notification. The notification looked like a smiley face. Manipulating her magic, she mimicked the touch of a human's finger and would touch the smiley face. The phone's screen then shifted down as a text box appeared. It read, ifunny, 4:26 p.m. now. Good morning, fellows. No days off. Let's get this bread.
What? I don't understand. Wait, so it's not just him that talks like this? His phone speaks crazy talk too? Or is he just mirroring the phone? Or is the phone mirroring him? I need answers! I must discover what this ifunny is so I can better understand Anon. I will help him if that's the last thing I ever do!
She triumphantly said as she bypassed the home screen of the phone and it went to dark for a second. Then, a yellow smiley face appeared on the screen, and like that, Equestria was doomed. Alright, boys, that's the end of this fanfic here, boys. Finally, after all these years, you know how long it took? It took like 40. That was just to read it all out, even with all the edits, the mistakes, the fucking background, all that, everything. So, hopefully you guys, appreciate the power that goes into making fanfictions and narrating them.
There was a time when fear would hold me down, 'cause I let it chain me to the ground.